My queer Americans, my queer beloved immigrants. Babushka Lyoshka, as promised, is going to read her piece about depth of queer. This is a very sensitive topic, and if you feel not comfortable, please get the fuck off from the screen. The huge part of losing the idea of having ideas, and as a result crushing down the identity, is the silence. The silence while everybody tries to overscream each other, the silence while partners pretend on being active in developing their relationships, but in reality building a distance between them, diving deep inside into the well of self-absorption. The silence while curious gossip individuals spreading out rumors about their friends, mates, neighbors, but hiding their own skeletons behind the Instagram filters. The silence, which rapidly overtaken a public space, has succeeded the politically determined silence of previous centuries of underground. There are no more topics to be silent about, but there are much more real personal characteristics to hide for the sake of the momentum and publicity. Framing current reality, we have no tools to decolonize queer, but declare the death of queer as identification, identity, and useful construct to play around with if you doubt your own sense of belonging. The idea of queer emerged less than 30 years ago, has been drastically overused and dramatically seduced by each and everyone who has ever dared to question the social order. Unlike the idea of otherness, the queer perception is twisted by all political spectrums, from far right to far left, and even centrists have experimented with queer. Queer is no longer a magical dust, helping us to escape from the filth of persecution to the imaginary world of surrealistic creatures. Queer has turned to be a fashionable term appeared on the cover of the magazines with no deep meaning behind. Over and over again we read touching stories on coming out, where the concept of queer is puzzled up in the way when the gender trouble never was the case. I believe that only oldest generation of gay activists opposes to the implementation of the queer word as a loose as those bright fighters of the pre-Stonewall and post-Stonewall eras. Queer is still something offensive, not tasty, and not sexy at all. Here is a question raised. Is queer sexy? Or should queer be asexual? Has ever queer had been excluded from the sexual agenda? To be honest, these questions make me being stupefied, as I have never separated sexuality from identity and identity from sexuality, considering these components as united materia. Being queer for me means to be able to express my sexuality along with my political and social attitudes, refusing to apply gender categories, although some will find that conjunction is aqueer. I'm sure that sexuality is a part of any identity, regardless. However, sometimes people get confused with sexuality, sex, and physicality. Indeed, sexuality nowadays is a developing force, but obsession with that brings sexuality down to the level of physicality, and as a result we lose personality and imprison the idea of having our own identity. Sincerely, problems with shaping contemporary sexuality gives to the concept of queer an epistemological headache. Uncovering physical parts of your body, even if it's performed in a high erotic way, does not mean that the person doing it is aware of connections between physical and spiritual. I assume that in many cases it's nothing more than business, narcissism, and publicity rather than self-expression in terms of grounded queer identity. Yes, people easily talk about sex and easily get undressed in the public eye than previously, but do they easily speak the truth about the sexuality, or simply playing around with facts in the sake of the best performance? Performance, the key asset for the queer theory in the late 80s, is not something extraordinary in the late 2010s. But that performance I'm talking about is only performed for performance itself to be liked by many of one's followers of curious media divers. This performative striptease under queer umbrella most likely won't tell you anything significant about the person performing it. You stare at the body as Ed Sheridan sings "I'm in love with the shape of you" and do see nothing except 10 muscles of tight lines. Many will contradict, arguing my thesis, pretentiously pointing out, no, look deeply and you see behind the body a person. Sure thing, sure enough, I see a person, but I mean, does a person sees a person oneself? Does that person agree with all characteristics given by observers? Where is the borderline between a self-representation and reading the presentations by others? And where in the picture is reflection on queer, if any? The elastic bubble of sexuality, praised by Alexander Doty, has extended enormously.